All right, let's go ahead and get started. Is that a little too loud? Is that better? Anybody have an opinion? Good, good. Thank you. Okay, how was everybody's weekend? I don't care. Mine was fine. Let's get started. First thing we need to talk about is the project. So, anybody have questions on the project so far? No? Good. All right, let me just say a few things before I answer questions. When I originally designed this project, I did not count on using the autograder. The autograder was a late addition. So, if you were putting stuff in the autograder and the autograder does not like what you're doing, it may not be your fault. I tried my best to write the autograder to handle your program, but it turned out to be relatively complex to do. So, there are a few things you have to do for the autograder to work well for you. The first is you have to duplicate my output exactly, precisely. And I think I can, yes, this output, the stuff that it asks, has to be completely identical to mine. And that's just because the computer is dumb. It's dumb very, very, very fast, but it's looking for those particular strings, that particular text, to match what it's supposed to answer. So if there is something off in there, like if you have an extra space between the word number and the colon, or anything like that, it will not work, okay? It just won't work. So you have to match it exactly. Yes, Jules? Yes, what will happen is we have the compile and format test. It has 3 parts. The compile part will let you know if your code compiled cleanly. The input format check runs your program a few times and makes sure that the format is correct and it's able to find things. So if you are not getting past the input format check, the thing to do is follow the instructions on the assignment page, run this thing exactly, and make sure you have the right format. And by format, things like this capitalization in kilograms are there. If you abbreviate meters, it won't work. It has to be completely identical to mine. I would recommend you run it and then cut and paste all my stuff and then paste that into your program. That will make the input check pass, okay? Yep. Yeah, if you copy my input, your internal program structure will still be quite different. I'm pretty sure. I'm not gonna like send you to the honor council for telling you to copy something and then busting you when you copied it. I'm much more subtle and evil than that. Okay? Yeah, Mamadou. Okay, so absolute value. You can use absolute value. The problem is that depending on the type of thing you're trying to make absolute value, the function is someplace else. So if you want it to work with floating points, you have to use a different header. Did you already figure out which one? Is that what you're going to say? FABS, there's a floating point ABS. So it's kind of annoying. Here's what I did in my program. I didn't use ABS. I used an if statement. I said, if this thing is negative, multiply it by -1, and that would turn it positive. And all sorts of hands are going up, so I'm worried that people are worried by that. But you don't have to use absolute value. You can write your own code that fixes it. So, yes? Yeah, if you cast it, it can work. But you got to be careful not to lose decimals. If you cast it to an int and then it works as an int, you've lost the decimals. And so when you get that back, the decimals will be gone. So it depends. You may not need decimals there. I don't remember off the top of my head. So, yeah. Yes, you can assume that autograder is not going to put in completely insane things, like negative values. Yeah, it's not going to be that evil. Now, I can't promise you it won't do that because behind autograder there is another program that I wrote that generates random data, and it generates random data using like a normal exponential curve. So there is some chance that based on that normal exponential curve, it will reach over into the negative area. But if you see a negative number, that's the problem. It's not that your program has to handle Okay, so I wrote another program that generates data for this. No. No, but you have to be careful. So part of this assignment, right? Part of actually the tricky thing about the assignment is pretty much everything is straightforward except for one thing, in my mind at least, which is figuring out what types to use where, right? Because sometimes you have to use floats, sometimes you have to use ints. It depends on what you need the output to be. If the output is going to be some sort of floating point number, then what do the inputs need to be? Some sort of floating point number, right? This was causing people a lot of problems, particularly on the headache factor, because the headache factor input was an int. It gave you the scalar as an int, so people were doing int division, and it was coming out as an int, and then the autograder will be like, no, we're looking for a double there. So you gotta. So a little bit of what you have to do is look at the output and reverse engineer based on the output what type you need to be working with all the way through. And that is the subtle evil thing in this program. Yes? Yeah, so after I wrote that, I decided that I wasn't going to give you unreasonable input because it makes it a little bit more complicated than I want, so you can ignore that. When in doubt, you can test my solution, okay, and see what it does. You can run it, yeah. The ID number is limited to 8 digits, will always be a 1, and the reason for that is I'm trying to give you values that will fit into an int, or an unsigned int, whichever one you think is appropriate, right? If I gave you something that was like 15 digits long, what do you know that can hold a number that's 15 digits long? Maybe like a long, well, double will, but it'll do it as a floating point value, and this is it. So when I was giving you the ID number, I was trying to give you the idea that will fit into an int, because I want it to be an inside an int. Yeah? Yes. And doubles, yes, and floats, and unsigned ints, right? The tricky part of this program is using the right types in the right places. So, yep. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. If you take an int by an int and store the result in a double, and then use that double someplace else, it will come out as a double, but the digits on the decimal place will always be 0, because you lose the decimals when you do the int division. Yep. The autograder doesn't look for that. So. Sure, why not just cut and paste it? Okay. So if we look at the output, we have subject ID, age factor, pregnancy in days, pregnancy factor, height, weight. Wait, did I do that wrong? Yep. Weight factor, stuff like that. So you can look at the types of that and kind of figure out what we're using. Okay. Yep. Yep. I don't know. I'd have to look at your code to see why that's happening. Yeah. No, the overall score in that case, if the stool frequency is greater than 6, then the overall score has to be a 0. Okay? You can just go ahead and compute the stool frequency correctly, the same way. So. Other questions? How many people have been trying the autograder so far? Okay, so a few things that the autograder will spit out. If it doesn't compile, you'll be able to see the compile messages. It's because the compiler is slightly different on the autograder than on CS class. They're running different operating systems. It's a pain to keep them at exactly the same version, so we're not able to. For input, essentially it looks to make sure your input is correct. Word for word, character for character, the same as mine. Okay, it runs it twice, once with a no for asthma and once with a yes for asthma to make sure you're doing that right. For output, what it's doing is it's the format check is only checking the format of your answers. It is not checking any of the values. So it says, is this thing 8 digits? Is this an int? Is this an int? Is this an int? Is this an int? Is this a double, 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 as necessary across the rest of the way. So if you're getting an output message and it says something like term factor error or age factor error, it's probably because you have a floating point where you need an int or vice versa. Okay? If the autograder gives you some cryptic error message that says something like spawn exp4 or exp6 not available, and it looks really horrible and it doesn't produce any other output, your program is quitting without ever outputting the last string. Okay, so your program is quitting early without any output. I cannot, in my grading program, catch that to give you a clearer error message. It just doesn't work. All right, one more thing about the autograder. It makes it super easy for you to ask me for help. If you submit your program to autograder and you get some weird message, here's what you do. You go, Clay, what the hell is going on? You can look at my program on autograder. I can log in to the autograder. I can look at your program. I can see all the error messages. You don't have to send me a copy of the code. I can see it. It's all on autograder, and I can look and try and give you some explanation of what's going on. Okay? I upgraded autograder over the weekend. It should be better now than it was before, and should give you clearer error messages, at least the portion that grades this. I upgraded the portion that grades Project 1. Any other questions on Project 1? Yeah? If you're getting an output score of 0, you should be getting some other messages in there that says something about term factor, age factor. I'd have to look and see. That's the perfect case to send me an email and say, Clay, I'm getting an output factor of 0 and I don't know why. And I'll look at your code when I have a chance and tell you. Yes, I will get to that next. So, any other questions? Going once, twice. Oh, sold, yes, what? When you start your program or my program? Uh-huh. Huh. Okay, I don't know why. I'd have to look and see. Mm-hmm. There will be no leading zeros. Never. Never ever. This first digit, the leftmost digit, will never be a 0. I promised you that. So. Yeah? Okay. We'll see. So CN broke a little bit, but not a lot. We're going to talk a little bit more about that today, about what CN does. So you put in 12 for egg allergy? I'm not going to do that to you. Why are you doing that to me? 18, 17, they're 142 days pregnant, 1.32. I have no idea how height and weight relate, so I'm just putting random numbers in here. 12, is that what you put here? Okay, here's what's happening. I'll just tell you really fast. This is looking for a character. CN's looking for a character. You enter 12. What's the biggest character you can get out of 12? 1. So it looks, okay, 1 is a character. I'll take that. Please enter the subject's monthly frequency of headaches. Oh, well, we have this 2 hanging around up here. So I'll enter that for headaches. And we get down here, and it goes, oh, now I'm waiting for some sort of severity thing. So that's what you'll find, is that this was, you're expecting yes, no. It became 1. Who knows what happened behind the scenes with that? And then it went on from there. All right, everybody good with that? Last chance for questions right now. All right, one of the things that you need to have in your code that we haven't talked about yet, because, well, let me just rephrase this. The autograder is a computer. Computers are stupid, but they're stupid. Do they care what your code looks like? Who cares what your code looks like? Humans. Who's going to be looking at your code beside you? Which humans? Me and the TAs who are grading, right? So when you have your code has to look a little bit nice. All right, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to hand out some sheets. These are a style guide that show you how to format your code, okay? Think of it as writing in English. When you write in English, do you indent the beginning of paragraphs normally? Do you have paragraphs? Do you use quote marks in the right place? When you set the margins of your paper, do you go completely from edge to edge, or do you have margins on the top and bottom, right? So formatting is important. Now, in this class, I kind of not really cheating. You all are using Nano because it's simple. Any extras? Can you pass them over that way? You're all using Nano because it's simple. I don't want to explode your heads by making you teach too much. I'm using Emacs. Emacs is a nice editor. You know what Emacs does for me? Is it checks my formatting is correct while I'm typing. Okay? So let's talk about what to do if it doesn't do that. So let me just change this. All right, so here's what I've done is I've turned off all the stuff that looks to see if my program is nice or not, okay? And now if I start typing stuff, you can see that what it does is it just pushes everything over to the left, no matter what, right? So let's talk a little bit about form coding style. First of all, when we read your code, do we need to know what your variables are? Yes. So let's say that we're working on project 1 and I wanted to declare some variables. What is A? Nobody knows what A is? What is A? What is this variable going to be used for? What? Okay, what value? What are we going to be using this value for? Yes, right now as far as you're going to say. What I was actually using it for is age. Which is better, A or age? Okay, let me say I'm going to have an int. What's AF? Why? It's a good guess, right? Age factor. However, if you're reading the code, do you really know it's age factor? How would we know if it was age factor? If it actually said age factor, right? So I tend to use underscores. You can also use camel case, whichever one you want, right? So name your variables in a way that makes sense. It's less typing for you just to use a couple of things at once. However, it's not as readable. Okay. Yep. Yep. Okay, so there's a couple of ways. Let's say up here we have age factor, right? But let's say down here we're going to compute some age factor. What's the formula for age factor again? Age minus 10 divided by 5 times 13. Thank you. I was using camel case just to show camel case, and then I forgot to change it. I normally use underscores for C++ code. Okay, so a couple of things. First of all, the way that this is indented is actually quite horrible, right? What we want to do is every time we open a new set of braces is we want to indent everything inside that braces by a little bit. Now, what does a little bit mean? One tab, two spaces, any other? 4 spaces. 6 is pretty uncommon because we're computer scientists. We always go by power of 2. 8 spaces. So different people have different coding styles. I typically do everything 2 spaces. Okay? Anybody watch Silicon Valley? The startup? It's a great show. There's a scene where there's a programming couple and they get in a big fight over whether they should use spaces or tabs, and they break up because of that. And then later people saw that and they went online and looked at big code repositories, and they figured out that people who use spaces instead of tabs make more money. So anyway, it's all crazy. But every time you open a bracket, move things over a couple of spaces. Okay? My editor does it, I think, 2 spaces by default. And so I just go with that. It makes the code clearer. Because then if we have an if statement here, we can say something like if age factor is greater than, I don't know, 40. Remember, I'm just making up numbers here, right? Now if I put a couple other spaces in here, it's clear, it should be clear, that all of these things that are in a line are operating the same way, but this one is only operating inside this block, okay? It's like, you know, if you're writing a paper and you have a quote, do you normally put the quote inside there a little bit? Everybody just nod yes. Yes, I normally block quote. And if you're quoting somebody who's quoting, you may do further. So indent your code. Use very good variable names so that it's clear. Okay. The other thing, a couple other things. Actually, I'm so used to just doing this. You should set constants for things that are going to be constant. So for us, for example, we might have const double age scalar equals, what value is this? I don't remember off the top of my head. 3.64? Like that, right? Then later, when it comes time to do the calculations, use that, right? Yes? Yes. Const means you can no longer change that value. So if you ever try to use equals again, it will go, nope, it's a const. I'm not allowed to change that. It would, the compiler would give you an error, and it wouldn't compile, I believe. So, okay. So const means it's changed. Now the nice thing about consts is that, say the people who are working, well, there's a bunch of things. Say we had some, later we added something else too, right? We added some other factor, and so we had const double, you know, skin scalar. And it also happened to be 3.64, okay? Let's say they expand the study, they look at people's skin, and they try to determine whether the vaccine is giving them skin problems. They do this big regression analysis to figure out, they do this big mathematical analysis to figure out how much each factor should be in there. And it turns out that initially skin scalar is 3.64 as well. Okay. If at some point later it turns out that skin scalar should be 5.7, is it easier to change it here in one place? Or if we weren't using consts, would it be easier to look through all the code, find every place that said 3.64, figured out which thing you were using, and then change it in the code? Yeah, it's way easier, right? It's way easier if you have these things to put them up front. These things are called magic numbers. Yes, sir? Int age equals 0. I need int age before I can input into age. Do I need to have the equal 0? This is a question we've answered about 10 times in this class. The answer is technically no, but for your sanity and peace of mind, yes. Because every time you declare a variable, you should initialize it. That prevents accidents down the line when you use it by accident. Okay? It's a defensive programming measure. Yep. Yes. Yeah. That's like, I'm not driving the car very far. Do I need my seatbelt? Why don't I just sit on the hood and steer? Right? Because I'm only going down the driveway. Just do it the safe way every single time, And then you never have to decide. And then the other thing about it is, I mean, when you're programming in kind of like the real world, assuming you ever go program in the real world instead of this very fake world, which we're not really in a fake world, look, this is your first steps in programming. I'm trying to teach you to do it the right way with good habits now that will save you trouble later. Okay? I don't always have these good habits myself. And I cannot tell you how many times they get me into trouble. Seriously. So just if you learn to do it the safe, right way now, then you will always do it the safe, right way, and then you don't have to worry about it, whether you're doing it the safe, right way later. Okay. So we have indentation, we have constants. Now sometimes, right, sometimes things may not need to be changed, right? Do I have to put in like 10 and 5 and 13 for the age factor? Do I have to make all those constants? Probably not, right? Probably not. So it just kind of varies. But for things that are numbers that people can use conceptually, right? So say we wanted to have pi for some reason in here. Is pi likely to change? No, it's not. So just put that in there. Okay, it's unlikely to change. I'm just doing that to mess with you all, the people who really like pi. So okay. There we go. All right. So style. Look at the style guide. Try and format your code nicely. Okay. Another place that you can see style. Have you all figured out that? Because I've only told you like 20 times that if you go to my webpage, you can see the last times I've taught this class. And in fact, I post the solutions to project ones from those last semesters. How many of you all figured that out? You should be crawling through my webpage. All right, go to my webpage, look on teaching. There's a big list. Find all the old 051 assignments. Click on them. Find the project one. Click on them. There's a solution. You can read my solutions to the past 051 assignments. Every time I teach 051, the same concepts are covered in each assignment. So if you go back and look at the old project ones, you will see how for other projects I used input, output, if statements, stuff like that. Okay. Yep. Yeah, so you're in the old assignments, the way I comment it is not very succinct, and that's because you know how I make you do your algorithm before you write your code? When I'm actually developing the assignments, I write all the comments first. I outline my algorithm in the comments, and then I write code to those comments. So that's why those comments are really long, because it's typically me thinking through how I'm going to structure the project rather than describing how the code works. You can be more succinct in your comments, yes. And in fact, if you do a good job with your variable names and stuff, you don't really need tons of comments. All right, everybody good on formatting? Does that answer your question? Any questions on formatting? And by the way, you're welcome to use the old assignments as the old solutions to assignments as a reference material. You don't have to cite it. Okay? I do that on purpose because I want you to not only write code, but read code. And I figure if you go back and read the old assignments and then read the code to see how they work, you are actually learning something, and then you can apply it to your own code. All right? Everybody good on that? Great. 1 minute break and play stand up. I was talking too long. All right, welcome back. How's everyone doing? I'm glad. All right, So in the past, we've talked about CN, and we talked about it a little bit earlier, right? CN does weird things when what? When you give it what? Sorry, I haven't broken out the candy yet. I should have done that before. What do you mean wrong input? Something that doesn't fit in variable. Can you be more precise? Yeah. Okay, when you have an integer and you put in a character as one example of that, in general the problem is when the type doesn't match, right? When there is a type mismatch, then CN can't figure out what to do. So let's talk about that for a minute and we can see what we can do. So let's say we have three ints, x equals 0, y equals 1, z equals 2. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to say cout. Sorry. Must be Monday. All right, and we'll CN into x. And we'll CN, now I'm doing backwards again. And then we'll output we got. All right. So here's our algorithm. It's pretty straightforward. Can you all see is it big enough? Yes? Okay, we have three ints, x, y, and z. We say enter three ints. We CN into x, CN into y, CN into z, and then we output what we read. Okay? Does that work for everyone? So let's make sure this compiles cleanly. All right, and we can run it and see what happens. CN error, okay. Who has some favorite ints? 69, somebody whispered. What else? 158 and 5. Okay, so if you run that, no problem, okay? Now, where do things go wrong? What is going to happen here? Yeah? It's going to output an error for x, okay. Is that your prediction? Other predictions? Yes, sir. All right, so we have a suggestion. It's going to put 0 for x, 1 for y, and 2 for z. Why? Why does that happen? Exactly. So it's looking for an int. Is a decimal point part of an integer? No, it is not. So what does CN do? Quits. It quits, right? And it will give you zeros for stuff. So we get 0, 1, and 2. Quits. All right. Yes, sir. No. So the question was, if you have your initializing values, you can give them different values so you can see what's happening in your own program. No, just make everything like 0 or a reasonable value. For this example, I made them different so that we could tell them apart. The problems that you're going to have tend not to come from CN breaking, but from other things. And I'm trying to teach you this habit now so that later you will not have a problem. Just put in 0. 0 is generally safe. Generally, but not always safe, okay? It's hard to see right now. I mean, I keep getting questions on like why we're initializing these variables. It's because when we get to the last project, project 5, there is some stuff that if you forget to initialize and you happen to have a random value in there, your program may or may not do strange things, unpredictable strange things, okay? So it's kind of like I'm telling you, you know, when you're on the highway, you have to keep 8 car lengths apart so you don't rear end anybody, and still we're only driving around the high school parking lot. And you're like, why do we have to be so far apart? There's plenty of room. It's because you're not going 100 miles an hour yet. Or hopefully ever. Well, maybe 100 miles an hour. I don't know. My analogy is breaking down. Do you see where I'm coming from? Okay. Okay. So let's run this again, okay? Let's do 12.7 and 9. We get 12, 0, and 2, because it saw this point and it gave up. It gave up. So what would be nice is if we had some way to check and see if CN has given up on us, right? Because it kind of sucks that one little tiny input error will make CN quit for the rest of the program, isn't it? How many of y'all think that sucks? So let's figure out a way to ask CN and see if CN has given up or not. So we have this thing, and I'm just going to show it to you. It's called cn.fail. And if you do cn.fail, that is essentially asking CN if it has failed or not. Or not. So if we have something that has failed or not, what type would that be? Boolean, right? Because it only have two values. It has failed or it hasn't. We don't have like it's failed to a level of 13. We don't have a fractional fail. It is just a Boolean value. So CN fail. What can we do with a Boolean value? We could declare it. We could put it in an if statement, right? So here's what we can do. We can say if CN fail, right here, we will know if CN failed. And we can just output something for the moment that said, okay? And in fact, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make copies of these, and I'm going to put a little thing down here so we can see for each variable we entered if it failed or not. So if it failed at x, if it failed at y, or if it failed at z. Okay? Everybody with me now? So here's our algorithm. We declare three variables, x, y, and z. We give them some initial values. We see out inner three ints, and we take some input. The first we take x. Do you have a question? Let me finish really fast. Then we say if CN failed at x. Output, otherwise input y, CN failed at y, input z, CN failed at z. We're seeing if it failed somewhere along the way. Yes?
It wouldn't matter if we use, so I noticed that in the first bit, we use a lowercase c for z and see out who says it wouldn't matter.
No, this, yeah, it doesn't matter because this CN right here is part of a string. It's not the CN that's being interpreted by the compiler. But, whoops, sorry. Here, I'll just fix it for you. How's that? Because this is just an output message, right? So it's not being compiled. It's just, wait, did I just suddenly comment everything? How did I do that? That's what I get for trying to type and talk at the same time. All right, I'm just going to leave those others capitalized because it doesn't really matter. Yes, sir? Well, let's watch and see what happens. Let's run it and see. Yeah? I don't know. Look, Emacs is a powerful editor. It has all these little keyboard shortcuts, and I fat-fingered the wrong things while I was typing. And I know undo, though. Control Shift _ undoes things, so I just went undo and did what I did. All right, so let's see what this does. We'll see if it compiles cleanly. I hope it does. All right, and we can run it. All right, where do we want it to fail? Do we want to break X, Y, or Z? Which one? Well, because I need to know to put it in the program. Sorry. All right, we'll make it break at Y. Reddit dad jokes. Okay. See what happens. All right, so CN failed at Y and CN failed at Z. Why is that? Yeah. Exactly. It broke at Y and it never got fixed. Okay, so if we look, we input a number for X, it was fine, so CN did not fail. We input a number for Y, it broke, so CN did fail, and said it failed. We got to Z, and what does CN do for Z right here? Doesn't do anything. It doesn't do anything because it broke up here, right? When CN is broken, it doesn't do any more input. It will skip all those statements. And so down here, it is still failed, and it says CN failed at Z. All right. Everybody good with that? So, wouldn't it be nice if we could fix it? So if we're going to fix it, here's what we need to do. We need to clear out the bad stuff. Clear out the bad stuff. What is the bad stuff here? Pardon? Just the decimal value, right? Because Cian's looking, it goes, can I make decimal point into an integer? And it goes, no, I cannot. I can put the leading 0 in there and then I die. So it would be nice if we were able to get rid of that. Anybody think we can get rid of it? Cian ignore. We'll tell Cian to ignore a certain number of characters. Okay? For this purpose, we're just going to put 1. It can kind of vary. And what it says is Cian is looking ahead to see what it's going to use. It says, okay, I'm looking ahead, and the next thing's a decimal point. I can't turn a decimal point into an int. That sucks, so I'm going to break. What ignore says is I said ignore one thing. When you fail, ignore one thing, which is going to be the decimal point, and it continues on. Let's see if that worked. So I'm not entirely sure it did. I might have done it wrong, but let's try it and see. All right, 3 inch 12.76 and 9. What? So let's take the 1 out, because maybe the 1 is the error. I ran this right before class to test it, and I didn't use the 1, so. Yes. Uh-huh. Yeah, but what's happening is it's also not fixing Z. Like it should fix Z after that, right? It should ignore that, and we should get some number after that. So, but I think actually Cian ignore might be doing something else. Yeah. Okay. So Cian ignore, this is turning out not to be the example I hoped for. I wanted to show you that it's possible to repair this. And it's not turning out quite the way I wanted. I should have downloaded my example I did before class to make sure it worked. I'm also working on a different compiler, so. So what was your question again? If I had 7.5, if that would work, let's try that too. But I think what will happen if we do 7.5 and 9 is that we will get 12, 7, and 2 will be the answer. Because I don't think it's fixing, it's broken when it gets to Z. So, oh, I know what's happened. We've already passed the Z part, and so that worked. So let's. It's becoming 0. I'm not sure why actually. So my example I did before class to convince myself how this worked was slightly different, and now I'm embarrassed because I hate when demos fail. But that's the risk of doing it this way. So no, I don't think so, because ignore. Oh, I know what I'm forgetting. Let's try clear. Actually, that might be what I need. I hope it's what we need. No. Pardon? Well, the problem is that Cian has failed, and it's supposed to Cian clear and Cian. No, it failed. It failed at Y, right? It failed at y because what happened is it read the 9, right? And then it said, okay, we'll make that 9. And then when it gets down to z, wait, maybe you're correct. What happens if I fail an x really fast? Yeah. Anyway, I'm sorry to have taken up your time on this, and it's not working like I expected. But this is how you're supposed to be able to fix it. Oh man. It happens on the Apple demos too, right? Like when they do demo things, sometimes they just go wrong, even when they've prepped it and practiced. Yep. All right, why don't we take a 1-minute break, and I'm just going to see if I can work out how to reset CN because it's not working on here. So. Okay, welcome back. I figured out what I was doing wrong. I need both clear and ignore. So, here's what happens. Clear resets the fail. Okay? Clear clears the fact that it's failed. But it leaves that decimal point there still to be caught. So, let me just show again. So, here's what I have clear and then ignore. So, CN failed at x. So let's say and then I've changed each one of these to clear and ignore together. All right, so when I run this, if I entered like 12.7, 0, and 9, we can see CN failed at y. It failed at y because CN grabbed these first two things, 1, 2, and then it hit that decimal point. So it assigned 12 to x right there, right? Then we have a problem because we have this decimal point. So what clear does is clear changes the fail state. It says, you are no longer failed, go back to work. The problem is that we have something waiting to be input. And what is that thing? That decimal point. Clear does not by itself get rid of the decimal point. Okay? So ignore right here gets rid of the decimal point. But what's happened is it's failed down here, and we've already passed our chance to input anything into y. So y is 7, and it picks up the 7 for z down below. This was not the awesome example I hoped it would be, but the point of it is, if CN fails, you can do the clear and then ignore to clear out stuff. It's not going to matter for this project. It will matter later on. Okay? It'll matter later on. So I'll revisit this and show you how to do it as it applies to the project later. All right, who's with me? Who thinks I'm completely incompetent today? I do. Sorry about that. So, thank you for the rest of you and being polite and not raising your hand. I'd probably cry. All right, questions on this? Thank you. Thank you for holding questions. So, all right. Yes, sir. Yes. Okay, when you're working in the shell and you do ls and all this stuff is there, rm removes, cp copies, mv moves, if you want to change the name. Yeah. Okay. So far this semester we have been working with stuff we haven't described. Okay, we've been working with a few things that we haven't described. And the thing that we haven't described is what's known as a string. What is a string? A whole bunch of characters smushed together. All right. Is string a variable type that you can just use anytime you want? How many of y'all think yes? How many of y'all think no? How many of you have no basis for judgment? That is the best answer, okay? Here's the deal. You can use string literals, but you cannot use a string variable without adding the proper header, okay? Anybody want to guess what the proper header is? Pound include. Yes. That's easy, isn't it? So, now we can declare variables that are of type string. We can say string name equals, whose name would we like to use? She's my own. Did you say Bob? Did you say Bob? Are you psychic? I was like half a second away from typing Bob. You know, whenever you go to restaurants and they make you give your name for a table, I always just say Bob, because it's like easier, and I can hear it. There's not that many Bobs around. Okay, so, all right. And now when we go to see out something, we can just output name, and what has happened? So here's our algorithm. We include the string header, so we can use strings as a variable. We declare a variable of type what? String. What is this? And when we put in there, Bob, okay? And when we output that, we output it. So here's what's happening. So far, everything that we do for declaring a variable goes and grabs just one single box and puts some stuff in there, right? Like each box in memory will hold a number, it'll hold a character, it'll hold a Boolean value. Will every single box in there hold a string? Why not? Yep, we can say Bob is my name, don't wear it out. We can make it as long as we like, and this would not fit into one box in memory. So behind the scenes for you, this pound include string is splitting it up over multiple boxes. It's making as much space in memory as you need to hold on to it for you. Yep. Yes? Mm-hmm. So we can initialize something with just, we can say, string blank. I think that'll work. Let's just make sure. Yep. So inside there, between those two quotes, there's like a hidden character you can't really see, called the end of line character. So. Questions on this so far? Pretty good so far, right? Much more handy than having a character. Yeah.
When you're making a new file to start writing a program in, does it matter if you have if you have libraries that you don't use, or why don't you just put every single library that we prefer?
So the question is, why are we being careful about what libraries we put at the top here, right? And only using the ones. And the answer is this. The answer is that when people write libraries, they can put functions in there, and they can put any function name in there they like, okay? you can imagine that some function names might be popular, like execute or run or something like that. If you have multiple libraries that have the same function in them, then you have what's called a namespace collision, and you have to resolve that somehow. So right now we're just doing it to kind of keep it simple. So, should you include IOManip in your program if you're using it? I did not use it in mine. And in fact, one of the problems that I had to rewrite the autograder for this weekend was to catch when people had extra spaces in their output, because that was making the autograder insane. So if you're using set width for your output, you're overthinking the problem. Just put one space in between. If you use set width and you end up with like 5 spaces, the autograder is going to be like, there's 5 spaces, I don't know what to do. In that voice, actually. So, yeah. You're right. You do need to use IOManip because you need set precision. Thank you for reminding me. And fixed. You need both of those in there. So, yes. Yes, you should have IOManip in there. Okay, so strings. Everybody happy so far? Yes? How about if we wanted input into a string? And I'm going to get rid of this goofy string thing up here, okay? All right. So here we declared a couple of string variables. Really only going to use name. We say cout into your name, and you see into name, and it says your name is name. Okay? Pretty easy algorithm. Start, output into your name, input name, output what you got. Everybody with me on this? Okay. Yeah. Okay. So string, anytime up here you see something up here, we're probably declaring a variable. Just like we declared variables with an int, we're declaring a variable, but this type it's a string. The name of that variable we're declaring is name. And then we're initializing it to just 2 empty double quotes, which does a little bit of magic behind the scenes to make sure that there's something in there that you know what it is. The thing that happens to be in there is magic and invisible. Okay, and we don't really want to get into that. So, then we declare another variable named blank the same way. Does that make sense? So this is just like variable declaration that we've done before, except now we're declaring a string instead of an int or whatever we were doing in the past. Okay. Does that make sense? All right, so let's run this program and see what happens. All right, what name should we enter? Billy. Yay, your name is Billy. It worked. Great, we're done for the semester, right? That's all we need to know about strings. What other names might you want to enter? Jack. That works. Okay, what other names? Bartholomew. Is that how you spell it? All right. Everything's working just fine, right? What other name? Mike Wazowski? Is that how you enter it? What? And your name is, oh, wait a minute. Wait, that didn't go well. Yeah, what happened? Yeah. Something happened, and that is this. Remember when we were entering numbers, we could put a space between them and they would be separate numbers? Remember that? Now what happened is we put a space between here and we have 2 what? 2 strings. Okay, we can fix that, right? Here's what we need. I'm going to change this blank. I'm going to change these around a little bit. I'll make this first name, and I'll make this last name. And now what we'll do is we'll do first name. And we'll do last name. How's that? And we'll out on here. First name, we'll put a space, nice space in between. Much better, right? Why? Why not? Why do you look perplexed? Let's just try it and see. All right. All right, Mike. Woo, that worked. All right, now what? Another name. Okay, there we go. What happened? It's just sitting there. Pardon? Oh, yeah, what's C3PO's last name? It's Anderson? C3PO Anderson? Wow, apparently that's right. So, okay, so this is a problem, right? So the problem is this. When we have a string, we have things that have meaning to us in English that may not match identically to like what we're coming in, right? There are people who only have first names, literally. There is a computer science researcher who publishes all his paper only under one name because where he came from, he only has one name. So I don't know how he deals with like the DMV in places that say what's your first name, last name, right? I have no idea. There are people who have many names, okay? When I was in college, I had a crush on a girl named Anne Marie. I won't say her last name, but Anne Marie was her first name, had a space in between too, right? So how does that fit into first name? Because there's really two names together. There are people who have very long names with many, many different things in there, right? Why are you two looking at each other? Do you have long names? How many names do you have? So 4? That's good. So it gets kind of hard, right? What we would like is we would like some way that we can input something that ignores spaces. Do you see the problem? You can use CN as long as whatever is separated by spaces. But if you're trying to capture everything at once, you need something a little different. All right? So here's what we're going to do. We're going to replace this stuff like this. We're going to do string full name. And what we're going to say is we're going to enter your full name. Like that. For this, we can use a command called getLine. GetLine means get all the text that someone types, including spaces, right up until they hit the return button. Okay? Hit everything up to the return button. So if we say getLine, we have to do a couple things. So first, we have to say where we're getting it from. Like, where are you getting it from? Right now, we only know about CN. We can only get things from the keyboards. Later on in the semester, we'll also learn how to get lines out of a file. So if something is stored on disk, we can read it out. You can also use this, not in this class, but later in your career, if you want to get stuff reading off of the computer network. Okay? So we say CN because that's where it's coming from, and then we have to say where we're putting it. So we say full name like that. It should work. So, whoops. Get rid of this. I'm sorry. Let me just comment that out for the time being. So now we'll just output and we'll get the full name. All right. See what we've done? We've changed CN, we've changed this CN that gets us things by field to using getLine that gets everything, and we are outputting everything we get. So let's see if that helps. All right. Who's the guy from Princess Bride who's in search of the 10-fingered man or 12-fingered man? What's his name? He only had 2 names. All right. I don't know how to spell it. Bob, right? So whatever we put here, will get captured all at once. Captured all at once. That is the difference between getLine and CN. Okay. So the question is, if you're working with strings, which one do you use? How many of you think you use getLine when you're working with strings? How many think you use CN? Nobody? Okay. Programmers are what? We're lazy NA. What we want to do as little work as possible. You can use, and you should use CN anytime you know what the format that's going to be. Okay? So if I'm giving you something that has like first name, last name, middle name, stuff, if I give you something that has like a whole bunch of strings in a row that are separated by spaces, you should use CN. And the reason is once you've read in that entire line, it's annoying to have to take it apart into pieces. So if you can read it in piece by piece, that is easier. If you cannot do that, then you have to use getLine at once. All right, let me show you one more thing here. And that's how we can kind of mix getLine and full name. So let's say that we want to have string address. All right. Yep. Yeah, I was just thinking, I'm making this example a little bit too complicated. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make a new program. All right. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to make a different program here. And we're going to go back to this earlier one where we have a first name and last name. Okay? And we'll get rid of that full name stuff. Everybody understand what I just did? I went back in time to when we had a separate first name and last name, and now we're going to output those. Let's just make sure this is still working before we get too far along with it. So this is our second string. Your name is Clay Shield. So it has a first name and last name here, right? All right. Everybody good so far? See what we just did? Now what we're going to do is we're also going to ask for people for their address. Good enough. Sorry, something's gone horribly wrong here. Okay. Let me just check. Something's gone weird with my editor. I suspect I have an error. I guess I don't. All right. Shields, okay. And now what we want to do is we also want to enter our address. I don't know why it keeps indenting that, so it's confused. All right, so we're going to enter our first name, last name, and address, right? Everybody good with that? So I'll compile. I'll run it. First name, last name, and address. Oh, it would help if we output the address, wouldn't it? All right, so our algorithm. Declare a variable for the first name, declare a variable for the last name, declare a variable for the address. Cout into your first name, last name, and address. Cin, put things into first name, put the next thing into last name, put the next thing into address, and then output what we got. Everybody good on that? Does that make sense? Yes? Silence is assent. You all owe me $20. Does this make sense? Okay, good. I've started doing that to my kids, by the way. It works really well. So, all right, so we compile this. We run it. First name, last name. And address. Wait, that didn't work. What happened? I have a space between 323 and St. Mary's. That's a problem. Yeah. How can we fix it? Do you have a question? Okay. Yes, sir. Exactly. So here's what we do. We can mix cin and getLine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use cin for the first name and last name. Why is my editor doing that today? It keeps making me paranoid. Normally my editor indents really well, unless there's some sort of error, and it makes me think that there's like an error somewhere. But okay. So we use getLine for the address, and cin for the first name and last name. So cin first name, last name, getLine address. Is this going to be better? How many of y'all think yes? How many think no? How many wish this class was over? Because we've been in here forever and the windows are closed and it's warm. I know that's what you're thinking, even if you're not raising your hand. So, and it got everything. Okay. Yep. Okay, why didn't I just put it right here? It will not make any difference in the program, but it makes a big difference for the readability. Okay? What you typically want to do is have, every time you have a semicolon, go to a new line. And the reason is that you don't want your code to stretch out too long. Oh, shoot. So does that answer your question? Yep. There was, yeah. Good question. So here's what happened, right? So there's an extra space. We input the first name, last name, and the space. So here's what happened when I, oops, let me just do it again. Good enough, okay? There's 1, 2 spaces there, okay? Here's what happened. cin goes, oh, I can get that, right? And then it goes, oh, I'm using cin, so I'm looking for a space to break from the next thing, so I'll get that. And then it goes, okay, I'm using getLine. What's left in the input to get? That space and this 323 St. Mary's. So what's happening is it's picking up that extra space. Now, do you want to see how to get rid of that? It's ugly and hacky. You ready? Here's what we do. We create a variable, char, extra space. Make it something. Notice that for a char, you actually have single quotes instead of doubles. And then what we're going to do is we're going to also grab that extra space using cin. And hopefully that will fix it. Oops, sorry, I got to put a space in there. It doesn't work the same as strings. Oh no, it didn't. Okay, then that didn't work. So here's what I would do. Oh, I don't like doing this, but I will. Ready? We'll use cin ignore to capture that just one. So here's the problem with, and we're getting across the problem with strings is that they're kind of horrible to deal with sometimes. And they're horrible to deal with because you get stuff in there that you don't really want. And you have to be very precise about how you program to get rid of them. There we go, we got rid of it. So I use this cin ignore just to grab that extra space right after it, which was better than the extra space approach. So, yeah. Okay, we could also capture this string and the address and then go into the string and delete the space in the front. Is that what you wanted to do? Oh, or we could delete the one right there. We could, but here's the problem. Say no, I don't want to talk about this now. Have a good day. See you Wednesday. So there are many different ways we could solve the problem of varying degrees of sanity and utility. How's that? Have a good Tuesday. Remember, if you're getting stuck on Autolab, just send me an email. I can log in and check your code. Okay? Oh, wait. One quick other thing I forgot to mention about formatting. Formatting. Don't make your lines really, really long. Make them only like 80 characters or 100. Don't just type and type across. So, good luck. Bye.